Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to do another mock draft Monday on a Tuesday. And this week, we're going to start out with the consensus board. I'm going to mock the consensus big board. So the first round is going to be the most likely pick at each pick. This does come with a couple of oddities that occur where some players don't really have a home. So I'm going to walk through this quickly, let you know a couple of the changes that I made to make this more representative, at least, of what we should expect. Let's get going here. First pick is going to be Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans, Abdul Carter to Cleveland, Travis Hunter to the New York Giants, Will Campbell to New England, Mason Graham going to Jacksonville, Ashton Jeanty to Las Vegas, Armand Membu to the Jets. That all looks incredibly familiar, right? Jalen Walker to Carolina, Will Johnson, New Orleans. Hey, I've done that a few times. Tyler Warren to Chicago. I was surprised that this is the most popular pick. Did that recently a couple of times, and I do like it quite a bit. Jahdae Barron to San Francisco, not so high up on that one. They've spent a lot of capital. Well, they haven't had a whole lot of draft picks in recent years, but the draft picks that they have spent on the defensive side of the ball, out of those limited draft picks, they've mostly spent in the secondary, and they've mostly hit on those. So, Jahdae Barron, excellent fit for the system. I know that they would have him graded highly. I just don't know about the need compared to, the front seven, the defensive line that's just been decimated. Teteroa McMillan, pick 12 to Dallas. This is the first one that gets a little bit funky. Teteroa is higher on the wide receiver board than Matthew Golden is, but Matthew Golden was the player who went here just because Teteroa McMillan gets, drafted by so many different teams. He just doesn't have a home currently. But on the big draft board, he's not in it. So I swapped out Matthew Golden or Teteroa McMillan for Matthew Golden here, and then that'll cause another fix later on that we'll have to make. Pick 13, we've got Kelvin Banks going to Miami. At pick 14, we have Colston Loveland to Indianapolis, Mike Green to Atlanta, Shamar Stewart at pick 16 here going to Arizona. This is another player, Shamar Stewart, who doesn't have a home on the consensus big board. He's not on it, so I moved down the rest of the edge rushers and put him here based on his average draft position being higher than the remaining guys, at least roughly high. Could be higher than Mike Green. Maybe I didn't catch it before that, but you get the idea. That's going to bring us on to pick 17, Michael Williams to Cincinnati. 18, Gray Zabel to Seattle. Here's another one where I had to make a change. This is because Tyler Booker is the pick here to Seattle. I really don't ever see Seattle drafting Tyler Booker. That's a terrible system fit. I don't think they would have too much interest in him. They're going to be running a lot of wide zone, and Tyler Booker's just not the guy for that. So really, really bad fit in this new offensive scheme in Seattle. So I took the next guard off the board, Gray Zabel, swapped him in. Much better system fit. That's the reasoning there. Pick 19, we've got Jihad Campbell. Pick 20 to Denver, Omarion Hampton, Shedeur Sanders going to Pittsburgh. Here's another one. Shedeur Sanders did not have a home on the big consensus mock draft board, so I put him in here. He's actually player 3 or 4, be average draft position, but this was the next place a quarterback was actually taken. That was Jackson Dart. So substituted Shedeur Sanders in for Jackson Dart here because we do expect Shedeur Sanders to go higher than Jackson Dart. It's Kenneth Grant going at pick 22 to the Los Angeles Chargers, Maxwell Harrison to Green Bay. A lot of similar picks here, right? A lot of common picks. Then that's going to bring us to pick 24. Have Buffalo trading up with Minnesota here to take Matthew Golden. I had to get creative. The board had Nick Emmanwari going higher than Malachi Starks, and they had Luther Burden and Emeka going higher than Golden, or higher than Teteroa McMillan, but we substituted Teteroa McMillan already for Golden, so higher than Golden. So we wanted to get Golden higher than those guys because he's expected to go higher than them. May or may not happen. And also, Minnesota is one of the teams that's most likely to trade back anyways, so that made a lot of sense. So I did what we got here to get a better fit to the Buffalo Bills because they had Emeka Egbuka going to the Bills at pick 30. I don't think that Emeka Egbuka is what the Bills are going to be looking to add, and their top 30 visits don't suggest so either. Looks like they're looking for what I think that they need is somebody to help take the top off the defense. So just a better fit here for the team. gets everything into a better place, gets Malachi Starks being drafted ahead of Nick Manwari. Just a little substitution that I had to make. Josh Simmons going to Houston, Luther Burden going to the Rams, Malachi Starks to the Ravens, James Pierce going to Detroit, Derek Harmon to Washington, Nick Manwari, of course, to Minnesota there at pick 30. Then we've got Tyler Booker going at pick 31 to Kansas City. That was Gray Zabel on the mock draft board, but as I said, I swapped those two because of the fit. Tyler Booker, a better fit for Kansas City. I still don't know that he's the best fit for them. They do run plenty of zone, but I think less wide zone at least. And then Walter Nolan here at pick 32 going to Philadelphia, and that gets us all caught up to the second round, where we're going to begin to mock the consensus board. So these are the players most likely expected to be going in the top 32 picks. That much we've got, is the situation that we're in. Emeka Egbuka also highly, up there. Obviously, a lot of these guys are borderline, get taken plenty of times in the first round. And there's a lot, it gets pretty deep into the number of names that could be taken in the first round. But here at pick 33, Cleveland Browns have Abdul Carter, still haven't figured out that quarterback situation. Neither have the New York Giants, so I really, really do apologize. But, as the GM of Cleveland, I have no heart for you, no soft spot for you, New York. We're going to go with Jackson Dart here at pick 33. That's going to bring us on to pick 34. New York Giants now on the clock. Earlier they took Travis Hunter. They were, I'm sure, hoping quarterback. I guess we couldn't trade up. I think this is why it's very likely that New York Giants will be trading out of this spot, trying to trade up into the first round. So something like this doesn't happen to them, but it does happen. No quarterbacks really available right now that I think are worth it unless we really want to reach, to some extent at least. Kyle McCord's my next quarterback up. Dylan Gabriel not too far behind. And Jalen Milroe, understand that some teams probably are going to be pretty high up on him. I still think generally we're at least looking later into the second round. New York Giants are just going to continue to take a best player available type of approach. Once again, Travis Hunter earlier. There's still an offensive line that we need to help to get fixed on this team. So going to go with Josh Connerly, really, really high upside tackle that I think I'll be a little bit surprised if he does make it into the second round, but not fully surprised. Brings us on to pick 35, Tennessee Titans. And oftentimes I do have them trading up for a slot-like wide receiver. I think a guy like Emeka Egbuka gives the Tennessee Titans something that they don't really have, but they do need two wide receivers, so this was more of a consensus pick than going on the board, but I think a Trey Harris, Jaden Higgins, Alec Ioman, or Jack Badge could all make a lot of sense as well here. For Tennessee, they're starving of some wide receiver talent. Jacksonville up next. They could also, wide receiver would make enough sense here. I also don't know if that's going to be a top priority in the team's mind. Interior defensive line would make plenty of sense. We got Mason Graham already in the first round, though. Safety is a big need for Jacksonville. So is cornerback. Just the entire secondary of this team. So I'm going to take a guy in Savone Ravel who can come in and I think really help to create an identity for this secondary especially, but for this defense, a defense highly lacking in any kind of identity coming off of their last year. Let's bring us on to Las Vegas. To me, this is kind of easy. This is the route I've been wanting to go with them all off season. It's kind of running back Ashton Genty, wide receiver here in the second round. Going to have him take a guy who I would be fine taking 10, 12, 13, 14 picks earlier in Jaden Higgins. I'm a real big fan of him. Think he left a lot on the field due to quarterback play where a lot of his contested catches did not need to be contested. That's going to bring us on to pick 38, New England. They went with Will Campbell in the first round. We could definitely go more offensive line. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But they do want to bring in a big-bodied, number one, X type of receiver. Trey Harris is next man up for me there, and I think a wonderful fit here in New England to help give Drake May that kind of big downfield target. And I think that puts last year's investment, Polk, into a better position. I really liked Polk a lot in last year's draft as a third-round pick, not a first-round pick. So I think that will help Polk to maybe succeed, too, in a different and new role by getting Trey Harris in here. That's bring us on to pick 39, Chicago. You got to look one spot behind you because you got another pick at 41. So if you got two targets here, who's the less likely option to be taken by New Orleans? And New Orleans could definitely be looking for a running back. That would not be a shock here. Travion Henderson, I think, would be a nice fit in Chicago. I don't think he's as good as Jahmyr Gibbs by any means, not even really that close. But I do think it could give you that kind of element into this offense. And then I still think we're looking for a big-bodied running back, but they might have somebody on the roster for that anyways already. And sorry, DeAndre Swift. That's going to bring us on to pick 40 in New Orleans. Lots of needs for New Orleans, but I ended up settling on going with a guard who's listed as a tackle, but he is a guard. And Donovan Jackson for them just helped to shore up this offensive line because quarterbacks aren't going to, especially the ones that they have on their roster, aren't going to go very far if they don't get good protection. That brings us on to pick 41, Chicago, back on the board. Going to go with Donovan Ezraku. Their hearts dropped when they heard Donovan just being, named at the podium right ahead of them, and then they heard Jackson, and they said, oh, thank God. So Donovan Ezraku, we've invested in our offense for Chicago between Travion Henderson and tight end Tyler Warren, and then they got some investment in their defense starting at this point and probably for the majority of the rest of the draft. Brings us on to pick 42 for the Jets, and the Jets could go a lot of routes. Wide receiver would make some sense. They've already got Armand Membu in the first round. Quarterback would make a lot of sense, but is it too early for that? I think maybe, probably. Interior defensive line is a need for them, and I think that Tyleik Williams could be something that they'd like. Plenty of options here. I'm going to say this again later. I mean, Darius Alexander, TJ Sanders, Omar Norman-Lott, CJ West to some extent, Alfred Collins more so, Joshua Farmer like quite a bit, are all guys who any of them could get taken ahead of one another, and it would not shock me of the least bit. In this case, Tyleik Williams, though, I do think probably more likely than some of them to go a little bit higher. Out of that group, at least the most likely to go in the top half of that group of names, we'll say. That's going to bring us on to pick 43 here for San Francisco. In the first round, went Jahdae Barron. I let you know, not the biggest fan of that pick, but we still, in part because we need a lot of help along the defensive line. That includes the interior and the edge rushers, and I am going to have them going Nick Scourton? I feel like it's probably Scourton, but Nick, he's got some good size. I think that San Francisco would like that 3-down edge rusher here. Not the biggest guy in the world, but pretty big for an edge rusher. And that's going to bring us on to pick 44 for Dallas. Kind of going the opposite route here along in this edge rush room. They went Tedero McMillan earlier. Running back could make plenty of sense here. It's a deep class, though, too. So maybe we're trying to assume that these edge rushers are going to be gobbled up before the next time that we get on the board, and that might not be fully true, so really we could go anyway. I also do want to say with this pick that I'm about to take for them, I may be kind of eating my dessert before my vegetables a little bit with this. Maybe Dallas could use somebody who's more of an every down edge rusher, whereas Princely Umanmielen, who I'm having them taken here, although I have him as best man available, maybe he is a little bit of a designated pass rusher, which is great. You can always use that. That'll be helpful. But also, maybe we want somebody who can help us on all 3 downs here in Dallas instead. I would totally get that and understand that. That's bring us on to Indianapolis here at pick 45. And they went with Colston Loveland before, so tight end we don't need. I think guard high up on the list of needs here right now. But I also have a player who I have higher than the guard prospects currently. And it's a good guard class, so I think that we can get one in the 3rd round just fine. What I am looking at is the linebacker room, and I love Carson Schwestinger, so that's the route that I'm going to go here for Indianapolis. And I really think that their decision makers there would like Carson Schwestinger a lot too, as he's just a freak in many ways. That's going to bring us on to Atlanta here at pick 46, and we will see Atlanta moving back. So earlier, Atlanta took Mike Green. They did not trade out of that pick 15 spot. If you don't trade back from that spot, don't freak out yet, Atlanta. I do think moving back from pick 46 could make plenty of sense as well, and could work out even twice moving back. I've done that for them before. I think we're going to end up doing that for them here, but Green Bay is going to end up coming up here. I don't pay attention to the trade values. I didn't write them down. There is a way to make this. Maybe it's 124 and a fifth or something. That might be what it is. I just don't quite recall off the top of my head what I did exactly with the few trades that I have, but they don't matter because we're not going to be going that far. The point of the matter is Green Bay Packers trade with the Falcons. That we know could happen. That is a possibility. Green Bay Packers have enough to do that. The Falcons have enough reason to want to do that. And the Green Bay Packers are going to come up here to take a wide receiver who I just think that they would fall in love with in Jack Bash. Guy who I don't know for sure that he's going to go in the second round, but I do think that there are a few teams who really, really like him a lot. That, if they're on the board, they haven't taken a wide receiver net yet, that he could be high up on their list to be taken. Definitely considered, we'll say. Pick 47, Arizona. Going to be another trade spot here. I don't remember exactly how I came to this. Maybe there was just too many options for Arizona. Actually, that is what it is. There was too good of a selection. It's well, let's move back. Let's let some teams take some of these before we go back. So pick 56, 47. We are having Buffalo trade up twice in this mock draft. I don't know how likely that is. But, I don't know. Maybe it's something like this. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. I don't want you to complain, Buffalo. So we'll give you 132 and a fourth. I know in one of these I did a third, fourth round swap. Probably not this one. Whatever. It's going to be Buffalo coming up. Buffalo is coming up for this shrinking cornerback room. Expecting them to start to go off the board. They want their selection. They have enough capital. Even with trading up in the first round in this scenario, they still have enough capital to do that and still, be fine. And they're a team that's, right there. They're on the cusp. So they want to make sure to get their guys in here. Trey Amos, a nice high floor guy who can come in, be good year one without too much development, I think. And that's really what we need here is to help raise the floor of this defense. And then we'll also add in maybe some pieces to help raise the ceiling as well. Pick 48, Miami Dolphins on the board, and they went with Kelvin Banks Jr. in the first round, and here I'm going to have them going with my guy here, so just kind of forcing him into this mock draft. I don't know if he'll go in the second round or not, but I do know I am not on an island with this. A lot of people really love Andrew Makuba, other draft evaluators who I have some amount of respect for, are also coming out of the Andrew Makuba closet here and saying that they like him a lot. I think nice fit for Miami. I do think pretty much any safety would be a pretty decent fit for Miami because they need it all right now in the safety room, but that's my choice for them. Cincinnati up on the clock here at pick 49. And they need guard in the first day, I think. The first 2 days, first 3 rounds of picks. They went Michael Williams earlier. So here we are going to go guard, and I'm going to get him, my man here in Tate Ratledge. Big fan of Tate. I think that good chance for him to succeed, and there we go. That's the decision. Pick 58, Seattle is on the clock, and I think, is this a trade? No, because we're on pick 50, not 58. So I looked down one pick here, and the Denver Broncos are coming up next. We have another pick, we're sandwiching Denver. So just like we did with Chicago, what's the most likely option here for Denver out of the guys that we like? And I do think that we would like to bring Alec Ironman in out of the guys that are available here in the wide receiver room because he's the one who's going to most bring us some sort of different element. Jalen Knoll be a lot like JSN in some ways, very vertical slot receiver. Jalen Royals probably would be a better version, I think, of what Cooper Kupp is at this point in some way. Not in every way. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is still fantastic in many ways. A more athletic Cooper Kupp, they would be running a lot of the same routes is what I'm getting in the same area of the field. So we don't really need either of those two who are next up on my board, but Alec Iomanner gives us something a little bit different than we have, although, Jake Bobo's there too, so who knows if they feel that they need this, but if they are feeling Alec Iomanner here, Denver is a team that they could think would have their eyes on Alec as a Cortland Sutton kind of replacement, as that's something that has to be on Denver's minds as well starting this year. Denver is on the clock here, and I'm going to have them go with a fun pick here. End up going Mason Taylor. I kind of had wished that I saved it for a different pick, but I'm not about to switch things up. Denver could go a lot of routes. They did go with Omarion Hampton previously, so I think a nickel, by the way, a nose tackle would be something that they could go for, but all those names that I gave you, out of them, Alfred Collins would be the one who I think is the most likely to give you the most and best snaps as a nose tackle. So it depends how much they really want a true nose tackle or not to whether they would be in the market here. Otherwise, in the third round, fourth round even, I think you can find some more nose tackle types of guys if that's all you're looking for. So as I mentioned with Mason Taylor, I kind of really would have rather had him being taken by the Los Angeles Chargers at pick 55, but whatever the case, I wanted to get him in this draft just to point the fact out that the NFL seems to be really, really high on Mason Taylor from all those who are, have connections to NFL sources. So I did want to try and get him in as a predictive pick somewhere in here, and this was where I slipped him in, as I do think that Denver could still be interested in a tight end. I like Terrence Ferguson. I think Harold Fannin Jr. would be a great somebody who Denver who might have their eyes on. Same with Gunnar Helm, Elijah Arroyo. So definitely don't have to force this unless they're one of the teams who thinks really highly of Mason Taylor. Then why wouldn't you take him if he's your best player available? That's going to bring us on to Seattle's second pick here. They have taken Gray Zabel and Alec Iomanner so far. We're going to turn our eyes to the defense. I think we need some secondary help yet. And I think that Benjamin Morrison, out of this group of three who are most likely to be getting taken here, is the guy who I have I think it brings something more different than what they currently have in that room. Tampa Bay here at pick 53. This is going to be an interesting pick, but I have to tell you that they have brought this player in as a top 30 visit just over the past week. So the interest is there. Don't say that it's impossible for them to be looking wide receiver, because they've got two aging wide receivers, one of them that they just gave a new 2-year contract, good money, it looks all fancy and everything. But, and then of course they've got McMillan, who came up, did well last year. Still, Jalen Noel is a guy who would be a really good Chris Godwin replacement in a couple of years. If you're looking forward, you got to make budget decisions at points in time. Like I said, in 2 years, you could get rid of Chris Godwin easily. Also, in the short term, Chris Godwin just might not be the player that he was due to injury. Well, not ultra concerned about that with the kind of money that they did just pay him. But regardless, they have shown interest in Jalen Noel, and I think that that's a fun, different route that they could possibly go that people would probably not be the most excited about, but nonetheless something that we could see. Pick 54, Atlanta on the board. Like I said, we're going to have them trading back twice. Now, if you're an Atlanta fan and you've been following the trail of peanuts and you're like, what the hell? Now they're going to be moving all the way out of the second round. Why did I waste my time watching this video? Don't worry, they are trading out of the second round. Give you your pick right at the end. New York Giants, I don't pick is something like this, another one of these types of trades. Maybe it was this in the third, fourth. No, that's probably not the one that was that. So we go forward. New York Giants are on the clock now, and of course they have come up for a quarterback. As I told you, Kyle McCord's been my guy this whole process. This has nothing to do with Chris Sims. I was just really relieved to hear Chris Sims say how high he was up on Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, my fourth quarterback, going to be going to the New York Giants here. They're not pussyfooting around anymore. They're going to make sure to get their guy. That's going to bring us on to pick 55, Los Angeles Chargers. And a lot of routes that they could go. Interior defensive line, definitely an option. They went Kenneth Grant already in the first round, though. Still, I think more there would make sense. Tight end could have made sense, but we got rid of the guy who I really wanted to get rid of here in the second round in this mock draft. Wide receiver, it's been pretty picked thin, although there are still two guys who will be going in this round who I'm high up on myself. Regardless, we are going to go with Azariah Thomas here, cornerback. They need help in their secondary as well. So that is the pick that we went with there. And for pick 56, Arizona moved back a little ways. I think that they really need another piece in this wide receiver room to help get things going. Earlier, they took Shamar Stewart. So that defensive line starting to get a little bit crowded with the additions that they added in. I still think on the interior of that defensive line, we want to add a disturber. A lot of those guys available. Norman Lott would have been a great pick here, I think, as well. But I'm really, really high on Jalen Rose, big fan, and I think that he would be a wonderful fit in here in Arizona. Kind of your slot guy, brings a different element to that wide receiver room, and one that I think is a lot more reliable than anything they've had there in recent years. Let's bring us on to Carolina. We need some safety help here. Going to go Xavier Watts to the Carolina Panthers, and then Houston going to be taking the other wide receiver who I love, wanted to get off the board here. maybe it's round 3 that he goes. I have heard from some people very connected that he might go late second, early third. So that's where we're at here, late second. Houston went offensive line, Josh Simmons earlier. So I do think we want to make sure to invest in our quarterback and make sure that he works. And that's where this gets to be like the perfect fit for Houston. And now I love this fit, because it's a little bit tricky choosing a wide receiver for Houston. They don't technically need a slot because they just brought in Kirk, not Cousins, but they brought in Christian Kirk. And then, of course, you have Nico Collins over as your big primary X receiver, also a pretty deep threat. Once again, Christian Kirk, very vertical slot type of receiver. And then you have Tank Dell, a very vertical player as well when he comes back. And he's injured currently. That's part of the reason why we are looking for more help in the wide receiver room. And I think that's something that they do not have in Houston, is that bigger, as in taller, not necessarily big-bodied like Nico Collins is, which they have a few of those big-body type of receivers. Hutchinson is one of those guys. Type of wide receiver who's just really, really good with all the underneath stuff. And I think that Torrey Horton could kind of be like your Rashee Rice here in Houston, and really you use him on all those crossers and everything. And he's really, really fantastic at those, like quicker than he is fast kind of guy, but still quite athletic, and just gives you that horizontal element instead of that vertical element. And that, I think, works really nicely with once you are fully healthy with Tank Dell coming back from injury. Now we've got a really complete room. That brings us on to the Ravens here at pick 59. Finally going to go with, one of these interior defensive linemen. Darius Alexander is going to be the guy via the consensus that should be going. So that's what we'll do. I have a little bit of a different opinion, but perfectly fine. I get Darius Alexander, why teams would like them, and I think the Ravens are definitely one of the teams that would like him, so it's fine. Detroit Lions are on the board. Sorry, so Baltimore had taken Malachi Starks, by the way, beforehand. I'm sorry, I know I skipped over a couple of teams probably while doing this, but Detroit Lions took James Pierce Jr. earlier, so edge rusher. Now, wide receiver on the board, but you look like the wide receivers in this scenario have been picked thin. So Kyle Williams, yes, that could be an option. Actually would be a really nice fit for them, I think. Overall, it gives them a little something different. But, there's obviously other routes that we could still go. And I think this focus on what got you here and what might need to have some repairs and some long-term options, as some of the options current players might be starting to get old and leave sooner than later. And just in terms of cost too, this offensive line is expensive, and we need to make sure to keep that relatively in check. So I think going guard, tackle would make a lot of sense. I have both of them as needs for different reasons. Guard is the more immediate need, and so that's why I'm not going to go with Ariante Ursary or Charles Grant, who I like a lot, or and it's going to be between Marcus Mbo and Dono Savantnaia. But Ariante Ursary is a player that don't be shocked if he goes to the Detroit Lions. Very much their type of guy. We'll talk about him again very shortly. In this instance, I ended up going with Marcus Mbo to the Detroit Lions. Washington on the board, and they went with Derek Harmon earlier. We could still use more pieces in that defense, so we are going to do that. We're going to go edge rusher. Via the consensus, it's Landon Jackson. Also, don't be surprised if this were somebody like Braden Swinson. I mean, any of these guys. JT, Jack Sawyer, Joshua Stewart, and who's another one that we like a lot? That's it. So just wouldn't be surprised if it's any of those guys, really. But we are going to go Landon Jackson. And then at pick 62, Buffalo, also going to be looking edge. They took Matthew Golden, Trey Amos so far. And when it comes to their edge room, they're pretty good in terms of their starting edge rushers. But what they do still need is something different, a lot of juice, and a designated pass rusher. And the answer to that is Josiah Stewart. He has some size concerns, but he is ultra juicy, gets some wins, and you line him up in these situations where he's just going to be able to pin his ears back, and I have no doubt that he's going to bring you something. So Buffalo, lovely draft, I think, for them here. That's going to bring Kansas City up. And Kansas City, of course, they went with Tyler Booker earlier. Now, a lot of different ways that Kansas City could be looking at this draft, but one of them could be, we will never allow our offensive line to be such an embarrassment as it was in the Super Bowl to that level ever again. So we're going to make sure that we've got this thing secured up. They could also be very happy with what they did in the offseason and say, we're good. That's possible. But in this scenario, I'm going to have them going Charles Grant, and then, of course, they've taken the guard before. Charles Grant, Tyler Booker, both of them not flexible, but at least could be absolutely fantastic within their specific roles as a guard and as a tackle on this team whenever they end up getting called upon. And that's going to bring Philadelphia onto the clock to finish this up. And we're going to go back to, I told you we'd talk about him, Ariante Ursary. I have talked about this before. I think he is exactly what Philadelphia would like to get Philadelphia in a very similar situation as the Detroit Lions. They have this awesome offensive line they have for years. They built it up. They've worked on, patching it up for the future in some areas, but in some areas they could still use some more future proofing, and Ariante Ursary could be that guy. 6'6", 330 pounds, so he's very much in the mold of what they're looking for in Philadelphia. Very much a guy who would catch their eye. The question is, do they think that they could fix him? And I think, especially with their offensive line staff, that, Ariante Ursary is a guy that they could fix. The stuff that he just needs to get a little bit meaner is really what it is, and you can't coach that into a guy. Sometimes they're, just coached to be a little bit passive. So that's going to be the choice here. That's going to be almost the end of this mock draft. However, Atlanta had a pick, and Atlanta's going to go with safety Kevin Winston, as he is still on the board. So there you go. That is it for this mock draft. There's kind of that first round again, but we went through that. Peace out.